Hello and welcome to Penny for a Tale. My name is Mitchell, and we have an amazing, awesome night planned out for everyone on this Monday, the most blessed of weeks. We have Ericka Skirpan of Entropic Endeavors,
Yeah.
as well as the writer for The Space Between Stories, an amazing blog that dives into stories, LARP designs, as well as narrative stuff. So if you're curious about LARPs, tabletop role playing games, anything and everything in between, I do encourage you to check that out. And you'll find the links for all these just to the left here for you to check out. You'll figure it out, I am sure. But Ericka, once again, thank you for coming on the show today. How have you been?
Good. Thank you for having me. It's been a whirlwind of a year, and I can't believe that we're almost done. But I've been really good, and 2019, I think, has been a really huge year in LARP design and even in storytelling design overall. The
Hmm.
amount of change that we are seeing and the amount of conversations that we are having that we wouldn't have even thought about having 5 years ago has a lot of things have come to a head this year, I feel like. And so I can't believe it's almost over. I'm very tired, but I'm very excited.
Hopefully, you'll get some rest before the new year approaches. The fight continues on. But not only do you, I believe, run
Velvet Noir.
Velvet Noir, which, from what I've seen, is an amazing role playing, a LARP experience.
You
Everyone
like
who,
it? I
yeah,
think so.
everyone who talks about it says it's amazing. But you've also written for 7C, Onyx Path, in terms of Requiem and Changeling, the Dreaming. But now more so, it looks like you're kind of focusing on the LARPer, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I've always been, I mean, I've been in role-playing games for about 20 years now, but my original background, I've been in theater for over 30 years. And so LARP really kind of brought me back to my original background. And when I was producing and directing theater, I was doing a lot of things that were immersive and actor and audience kind of becoming the same people,
Yeah.
an audience being able to have agency and participation. And so when I found LARP almost 20 years ago, it spoke a lot to my artistic soul, but I kind of kept it and theater separate. And nowadays I'm combining them a lot more. I would say half the stuff I run you could kind of consider immersive theater more than you consider it LARP. It's very rules light, it's very free form, it's very player agency directed. Um, and so I've really found my artistic passion there. And I miss writing for tabletop games because it's nice to get paid to just write. But at the same moment, in a lot of tabletop, I see a lot of mechanics, like hard mechanics, stats and dice rolls and things like that. And that's where I kind of falter as a creator. I'm way better at making narrative arcs and developing how do you consent negotiate
Hmm.
or scene resolution instead of go, well, I'm going to roll my dice and you can roll your dice and we'll compare them. And I'm not saying one is better than the other because
Yeah.
there's a whole lot of enjoyment to be had in games where you win because you got the right dice roll and you hit that natural 20 and you're so excited about it. And a lot of things that can come from simulationist role play, which
Hmm.
you need the more games by chance mechanics for. You don't need the consent negotiation. Um, but I'm really good at the consent negotiation and
Yeah.
how you can do it and combine it in storytelling that still surprises people. And so when you find your niche at what you're really good at and people ask you to do it more and more, I had to make artistic decisions. I felt real bad. I just turned down a freelance writing gig, but I was like, no, Velvet Noir is going really well. We just licensed Real Royalty to run next year. We
Ooh.
have a few other projects coming down the line, and I want to give everything I do artistically the right amount of time. So
Yeah.
it wouldn't be fair to try to keep pulling myself between tabletop and LARP when LARP is really what I'm good at. And really, I have enough work in LARP to keep me going full time nowadays.
Definitely. So, for the viewers and people who might not know the terms, can you kind of say your opinion on what the difference is? And this is actually an audience member's question between LARP and immersive theater.
Oh, sure. So LARP is live action role play, and on the far side of the spectrum of LARP, you will have games where basically they took Dungeons and Dragons and put it on its feet. People go and dress up in medieval costumes and have damage calls when they hit each other with foam weapons. And they have a certain amount of health points. When you go down those health points, you're dying until a healer comes over and puts you back on your feet. And it's basically making the tabletop game of Dungeons and Dragons live. That's some of the most classic forms of LARP in the United States. Goes all the way back to the 70s and 80s, that style of LARPing. And then in the US, White Wolf came along, and the Vampire Masquerade and all of those books. Quickly people went, we want to act this out too. And so they picked it up and started going to goth clubs and pretending to be vampires with a similar set enough rules. Actually, back in the 90s when we started Vampire LARPing, we just kind of took the tabletop book and went, okay, we're going to LARP off this. And then White Wolf was like, oh, we can make money. Let's design the Mind's Eye Theater at the time.
Yep.
And they made us LARP rules, which involved a lot of rock, scissors, paper playing for you to figure out how your vampire won using their disciplines.
Yeah, I played that for a very long time.
Yeah, I did too. And then over the course of that, it's grown as a hobby, and it's gone into more free-form ways. And there's actually an entire other LARP scene up in the Northeast, and the intercon scene and smaller free-form games where they never used rules. Their rules were like, respect each other's agency and your safety needs, and let's make up a cool story. Here's a scenario, go. And those I would consider to be a lot closer to like organized improv theater scenarios. And then you have the other side where they just call it immersive theater, which the productions like Sleep No More, which is a retelling of Macbeth going on in New York City right now. Then She Fell, which is a retelling of Alice in Wonderland, where the audience is a part of the show. You walk through all different parts of the set and you interact with the actors, and they'll occasionally give you things to do, or you can talk and communicate with them. That's immersive theater. Some people would also call like murder mystery dinners immersive theater. And the line that I'm still seeing working in both of these areas is that in immersive theater, there's still a pretty solid script.
Yeah.
Actors have done a lot more rehearsal. They know what's going to happen. And I'm the worst immersive theater audience member because I'm so used to having agency. I always break the script. I'm like, no, I want to talk to these people. And what if we go pursue that plot over there? And they're like, no,
don't
can't
do it.
leave this room, ma'am. And I'm like, oh, okay. Yes, I can't leave. We're still on a script here. So those shows are they're still act 1, act 2, act 3. LARPs, we work really hard to give agency to the players going, we don't know how this script is going to end. It could go differently day by day. And yeah, those are the differences. I think there's a lot of people working to bring them really close together. And there's some LARPs like Velvet Noir. We had a playtest basically back in May, which was a one-night scenario. It went for about 6 hours at the Drake Hotel in Philadelphia. And I realized after we ran it, we were doing it just to see that some of our mechanics worked and our safeties were working, and just see if we could get it on its feet in a small way before we went an entire weekend. And now that I think back on it, I was like, oh, we could just box that as a show. It would be a 6-hour long show. We know what the script points are. You know, everybody shows up for a party, something awful happens, everybody cries, everybody gets drunk, and everybody leaves. We would have to train our audience members, but we already have our lead cast in place to train them. So I've been thinking a lot about how I can bring Velvet Noir into being more of an immersive theater and bridge that gap, because we're so close, and really they could be the same thing. It just depends on what you define role-playing games as and where you draw the line between game and art. I don't really draw the line. I think gaming can be very political. I think gaming can be very artistic. But a lot of other people do. So those are my definitions. I hope that helped.
Excellent. So, of course, there's so much to talk about in the world of LARPs and tabletop role playing, and from your experiences and stuff like that. But tonight we are talking about something important to both of us, and that is safety and consent mechanics in tabletop role playing games and LARPs. Just kind of the spread of this wave of new mechanics and a real push to try to make sure everyone feels safe, but also explore kind of like these very dark and troubling themes in our storytelling. And you recently published on your blog an article titled "We Can Tell Dangerous Stories Safely." And for those watching, I'm going to post that so you can take a look at it right now. But it goes into different safe spaces and stuff like that. But could you kind of like summarize that article for us with your best ability? I know there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, basically, it's a direct correlation, is what I say, that the more dangerous topics you are dealing with in your game, the more safeties that you have to have in place. So if you are just playing a game about happy, bright rainbows, and you're never going to touch on anything that could be triggering to somebody, or anything that's like really deep, intense emotional topics, or bleed, which is when we say like the player and the character's feelings cross over, then you don't need a whole bunch of safeties. You probably should still have a way to get out if somebody like has a panic attack because they've been overwhelmed because of too many people, but you don't need a whole bunch of like emergency breaks. That's probably a good way to put it. But if you're doing a game that is about racism or sexism or police violence or a bunch of these things which can be really triggering to people because of our everyday regular lives, you need to give people not just ways to get out, not just ways to self-manage their emotions and their care, but you also have to create a community for people where they feel safe using those mechanics and feel safe telling those stories with the people around them. I would personally have a real issue going to a convention, and if I did a tabletop version of Velvet Noir and I had no clue who was signing up to be at my table, I would have troubles running some of the plot elements that we have because I would have no way to control the personalities and the community at my table. So it's a bit of a challenge, and I don't ever want to be gatekeepery or exclusionist, but you have to set up things in a way that everybody feels safe and cared for if you're going to tackle these topics. And if you can't set that up, consider if it's actually really important for you to touch on these things. There's 10 million stories out there. We don't have to tell these dangerous stories. But if you're going to, we just have to take a lot more care than you would if you're just sitting down to play like Parcheesi.
Yeah, definitely. And you see more of that with the communities now. I mean, Cult Divinity Lost came out recently that touched on a lot of tough subjects. I know the Masquerade game had a lot of stuff, but these books are more and more exploring these dangerous topics, so to speak. But for Velvet Noir, what do you do to ensure that a diverse cast and participants feel safe, but are still able to kind of be in these intense, or even from like the sideline view, almost like dangerous scenes, if that makes sense?
Sure. Just for people who might not know, Velvet Noir is a LARP set in late 1920s America about American oppression and racism and sexism and a lot of the really horrific historical things that happened in our country, which are sadly starting to happen again now. There's so much mirroring between us and 1929 with the historical research we've done. It's been really terrifying and
Yeah.
horrible, actually, but it made it also very important. And when I started the game, I said, I want to hire minority voices and disenfranchised voices in the LARPing community because we don't hear from them a lot. And just put my money there and put our company's money there and empower them to tell whatever story they find to be important in my sandbox. I made a little Noir 1920s sandbox and I said, tell stories about your people if you're comfortable working for me. And so the first thing that we really did was we said, we've given the control to the minorities and the disenfranchised voices that we're hiring. That myself and my business partner were both white. We're both privileged, just in the privilege of being white in America. And we fuck it up sometimes. I'm sorry. I hope I'm allowed to swear.
Oh yeah. This is a mature channel, so have at it.
We fuck it up just from our upbringings. We're always consistently learning, and so we said if we're hiring these people who have been damaged by the gaming community in a lot of ways, gaming has not been a safe place for disenfranchised voices for many years. We need them to feel safe so they can create what they want to. And so our first thing was saying, you've got the control, we don't. And we have stuck to that promise since then. And every single time they call us out on something, we're like, all right, we got to fix this. How do we change it? You're the bosses. And once we did that, then we started writing these stories, and they started writing the stories, which got really hard into really dark topics.
Yeah.
And I started with the basic safety mechanics that a lot of games use. So they're trained into a lot of LARPers, which is the OK check-in, where somebody will flash very obviously like an OK sign. That has gotten controversial lately too, but it's still what we use at the moment.
Yeah.
And if you get that sign, that's somebody going, I don't know if you were okay off game. And you can respond with either a thumbs up, I'm okay, I'm not certain, which is a wavy hand, or a thumbs down. And if you get wavy hand or thumbs down, the scene stops. You check in with the person, you get them to whatever they need, be it water, shelter, safety staff, whomever they need, and then you can go back to role playing. So that's one. And the look down, which is anytime you want to remove yourself from a scene for whatever reason, put your hand over your eyes and you walk out, and nobody asks questions. They act like you were never there. So if something hits on a triggering topic or is too overwhelming or whatever, but you don't want to make a big deal out of it, because sometimes it's really uncomfortable to set your boundaries and to say, oh, this is not okay for me, but all of my LARP friends are cool telling the story, so maybe by peer pressure I should stay along. So the look down's really nice because nobody asks questions. They trust you to go away, and we now use look down for all of our out of character purposes.
Yeah.
So you don't even know that somebody could be triggering or in trauma or anything. They just might be walking out of character to go to the bathroom. And it's made it easier for our players to access that resource because they don't feel like everybody in the room is looking at them because they've looked down. Now it's just like a common thing. So we started with those two basic safety mechanics. And then we put in some calibration mechanics, which are like if you want to ramp the scene up a little bit, or you want to ask permission to do something physical, you can say, hey, listen here, if you keep yelling about this, I'm going to pour my drink on your head. And the key words, listen here, that's permission for, I'm going to pour my drink on your head if you say yes or you thumbs up to this. And then we have layoff. Layoff is, hey, layoff, I don't want to have this argument anymore. And that's we don't need to stop the scene, but layoff, can we tone it down a little? I'm getting overwhelmed. I'm hitting the edge of my limits and boundaries. So we just need to slow your pace. It would also be considered a yellow light if you ever use the red, yellow, green system. So we put those in, and then when we were examining things like use of slurs, we're never promoting the use of slurs, but it was a very real and awful part of our history. But there are certain words out there that will stop entire conversations immediately, as they should, and will trigger people hearing them. So we're like, how do we pretend that slurs are not an awful part of American history? Because we don't want to. They are a part of it, but how do we include them in our game where it would put a lot of people at immediate risk to hear them? And so we designed further consent mechanics of, if you want to bring that sort of language into a scene, any person who might hear it has to pre-consent before you use that. You can't scream it across a room where there could be 30 other people who would hear and never said yes, they're okay with it.
Yeah.
And then even once you have done it in a consensual scene, you and that person have to debrief after. You've got to check in. You have to make certain you're both cool with each other and it was okay the way it went down, because sometimes it'll be like, yeah, I'm fine with this word. I'm fine with this word. And then you hear it and you really realize you're not. And so having that mandatory debrief makes certain every step of the way we're safe along the process.
So how does that pre approval work? You're going into a scene and let's say just for this example, you know, you're using the word stupid. Obviously, you know, this isn't a you understand, but yeah. But how do you guys get together and say that we want to use this in this next scene?
A lot of our scenes are vaguely pre-planned.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we'll know that the cops are probably eventually going to come in and raid the illegal booze farm for illegal booze.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a shock in a prohibition game.
Yeah.
And so people will say, like, we have a thing called classified ads before every game, and somebody will put up in the classified ads, hey, I want to do a really vicious scene of police violence because I'm trying to, that's a part of my character story, or whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
I'm open to people using harsh language. Can we talk about it? And then those two players, one of the people who are playing our cops, are amazing NPCs who
Mm-hmm.
have some of the hardest work, and they're such nice people and sweet guys going, hey, I'm going to use my privilege to play this violent white racist guy.
Yeah.
It's been really hard, but they'll say, hey, you're looking for this kind of scene. It's generally very cathartic. I'm willing to do it with you. What are your limits? And then those two, like, I've seen where certain cops will look to arrest certain players because those players are comfortable and feel safe with them, and they've pre-negotiated hey, if you arrest me, we can do this in my interrogation scene.
Yeah.
And sometimes it doesn't happen because those scenes get big and chaotic and nobody knows who's actually going to be arrested. Like, for all this pre-negotiation, there's still a lot of surprising simulationism, because once things hit the fan and story starts going, I get surprised every single time, and I run the game. So.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think that's one of the most fascinating aspects of LARPs is you have no idea where the story could go in its nuances and in the way it just kind of explodes into reality.
Yeah, last game, the players burned down a third of the city, and we didn't plan it. We didn't even know it. Halfway through Saturday evening, players started evacuating people from the city. We have this vintage phone that they can call the city on.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, yeah, we're trying to get 10 people out of the shtetl and 20 people out of South Street. And all of the STs are like, okay, yes, you can get people out of. Why are they evacuating people from the city? I don't know. We literally had no clue. And finally it was like, you can evacuate people, but where's the most dangerous place?
Yeah.
And what do you think the danger is? And they're like, well, the chemical plant's fire and all of the sewers are ablaze. And I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
Okay. That's bad. Yeah, you should get people out of there.
I'm convinced.
It was hilarious. And it was, somebody described something wrong and other people misheard things, and there was a weird telephone chain, and then a third of the city was on fire.
Mm-hmm.
And we're just like, okay, cool. This has created plot for the rest of the night. We don't need to write anything. We just went with it. But then even that hit some really hard things. We have a Jewish faction called the Mishpacha, and part of their territory burned down, and the cultural trauma with a lot of Jews of having their homes burned.
Yeah.
Was really awful. And so we sat there with Samara Metzler, who was the writer of that faction, and she's like, hey, this could be really damaging to a lot of my players. How can we make certain that people can opt in or opt out of this fire experience? Mm-hmm. And we ended up saying the shtetl did burn. most of it was on fire, but it got caught really fast, and most of it was just cosmetic damage, and everything can get rebuilt. And unless you want your house to have burned down,
Yeah.
it's fine. It's just going to take a little bit of cleaning. And then the players were able to opt in or opt out of the experience, even though at the time on the ground, it felt like that entire section of the city had burned.
Yeah.
And this plot went out of control in a way which could be damaging to our players. But
Definitely.
we were willing to have that conversation and listen. The moment somebody had a concern, we're like, yep, time out. That's right. How do we deal with it? And we did, and it's turned into a really great story.
Yeah, and for people watching, feel free to pop up questions, and we will make sure that Ericka gets it. This is everyone can participate in this amazing interview. But with LARP being so chaotic, just going anywhere with lots of different people's experiences coming to the forefront. How do you see kind of like the evolution of safety mechanics? What's the next step, and what are you kind of learning as you continue to kind of explore this realm?
There's the next step for me, I think, is going to be making certain that games across the board are using some basic safety mechanics. We're getting there, but I know, just like you said, where you were in a tabletop game and somebody was protesting using the X card, I don't see any reason why somebody wouldn't have basic safety mechanics, whether it is the hardest, most boffer, crunchy LARP out there, or the most trusting, freeform, whatever. Having a few basic safety rules that put player before game is only going to make the entire community better. This is a game. Ultimately, these are games. We are humans. We are people. And our actual physical and mental health absolutely has to come before the game that we're playing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so I this might be awful of me to say. I have a real hope that players are going to vote with vote with your feet. And if there are games out there that are completely refusing to run any sort of safety mechanics or have any basic safety things, they stop going. I want this press for everybody to say, and there's a whole lot of amazing people online and influencers and LARPers out there who are very loudly fighting for this in communities that aren't so aware. And so I'm hoping that we can kind of get it across the board in the next 5 years. For future safety design, I think we need to train our organizers better about how to teach these things, because tools don't work if players aren't using them.
Yeah.
And I've been through a lot of workshops and times where they'll show you the tool once and then they toss it away and they never bring it up again. And that means the player's mind isn't trained to go there in a moment of crisis. And so they don't get used. And so teaching organizers how to use their safety tools, how to teach them, and how to do things like they'll have the uncomfortable conversations of removing toxic people from your communities. It sucks. I've had to ban like a dozen people in this last year from various communities, and it's never fun. I never want to do it. But if we aren't willing to do that, then people keep tripping on the missing stairs, which is what we often call like dangerous person in our community that everybody knows about but nobody talks about and is still there. And then we can't pursue these stories. We can't do more dangerous or more innovative experimental things, because I don't want to do that with somebody that I know people don't feel safe around. And the other big, huge, this is probably where I should have started. The biggest challenge that we're going to hit in designing for safety and having these conversations is the discussion around mental health. And people who a lot of us have mental health issues. I am in active therapy. I talk about it online all the time. But where is the line through somebody who's having mental health issues or having like active crisis or gone off their meds or whatever makes them, because they have a problem that is a sickness. I too have a sickness, and thank goodness for my meds. But if I went off my meds and I turned into Ericka, the bitch of the West, which absolutely happens when I go off of them, Should I be removed from a game? I think my answer to this is I would want somebody to remove me if I was acting like that.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same moment, with American healthcare, a lot of people can't afford meds,
It's
can't afford
tough.
therapy. It's
Mm-hmm.
really tough. People go through life changes and hormone changes and things like that. So when do you draw the line of a player isn't safe for a community because of something that is out of that player's hands?
Yeah.
And I don't have a good answer for that right now. I'm working. We had an issue that I hired a therapist to help us get through this issue with a single player because I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to do it safely and respectfully and use language which would not be further traumatizing for victims or players. And I think I'm going to hire this therapist again and be like, hey, I see more problems in our future, and I don't know how to do this without being ableist,
Yeah.
without being really gatekeepy, but also while keeping our communities safe. Um, so that's going to be the issue we have to tackle. And I don't have the right or wrong answer for it right now. I know in single instances, if somebody is showing unsafe behavior actively in a moment, they need to be removed from that moment. Or generally, they need to be coached on their behavior. And then if somebody's proven that after coaching, they can't rectify their behavior, they need to be
Yeah.
removed because they've become unsafe in that space.
Mm-hmm.
But once something like that happens, do you let them back in? I'm not going to ask somebody, how are you feeling today? Did you, get the help you needed? That's not a thing I need to know as a LARP runner.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a thing that a few of us have been actively talking about, going, we got to start designing around that and having these considerations if we're going to run games that deal with really hard, emotionally triggering subjects. But also, not every game is for every player, and that's totally fine. That line has been used to defend awful communities before. I know people get really mad around the line, not every game is for every player.
Yeah.
I mean it for I would never want to do a game around body image and weight issues. I
Mm-hmm.
think that really should be discussed. I just know that if I went into there, I would be a wreck. I couldn't emotionally handle it. That's way too close to the shit that I'm dealing with in real life.
Yeah.
So if there's a game that you're like, nope, that'd be really triggering for me, just don't play it. That's okay. Um, Somebody said, Just Comstock, who's one of my leads at Velvet Noir, said LARP runners owe you safety, not
Mm-hmm.
comfort. It is your choice to decide what is comfortable and what you were able to do or not. We're just going to give you
Yeah.
guidelines for safety. And I was like, yeah, that is a good way to put it.
Yeah, that is really good. And in the for the sake of just kind of normalizing the mental health discussion, I too take antidepressants, and I go to therapy, and I struggle with things just as well. And it's amazing to see people kind of get more comfortable speaking about this thing, and it not being such a taboo issue as it has been in the past. But still, like, there are places where you say that, and then people are going to very much judge, or everyone knows the looks you sometimes get when you talk about that. So it's amazing to hear that you guys are kind of looking into this and have these questions, and even though you don't have the answers, you're still trying to engage it and figure out, what do we do? So we have one question from Kaza Marie, and I hope I'm saying that right. But they say, Ericka, do you imagine these safety mechanics could be used outside LARP, and maybe for all social settings?
Yes, absolutely. I wish we could teach them across the board. I know a lot of LARP households use the OK check-in just like in their household on a regular basis. I've definitely used it with my polycule before because we're all LARPers, and I know sometimes it's a really nice nonverbal way just to flash the thumbs up, all okay, buddy? Yeah, and we all know what it means. I've used it in teaching I've consulted for theater companies before
Hmm.
and taught them to use it or these basic safety mechanics for their immersive design things, because theater can get really intense and there's not a lot of conversations in theater about safety right now.
Yeah.
Um, and so I've taught it there, but I'd love to use it around offices. They're just really nice shortcuts, and I've told my therapist about them because my therapist hears way too much about LARP and about how you can check in with people and how you don't have to interrupt the flow of things. Like, I could do it in a business meeting. It'd be really nice. So yeah, Kaza, if we can teach the entire world how to use these safety mechanics, that would be great. I can't even get the LARP world to use them.
It would be good to see. And it's just it's interesting to see kind of like the shift to something a little bit better, despite the horrific things that are happening in our government in the world right now. But you see people starting to spend a lot of time, like you are, Ericka, on figuring out how to make sure people are feeling safe. That is a priority for not only games but just kind of everyday life. Are you okay? Do you feel safe? I want you to feel safe. I think these thoughts and these kind of like focusing on those type of topics it's such a breath of fresh air, I guess, to see and hear.
I think it's been extra necessary because our world's gotten more dangerous.
Yeah.
Like, as a queer woman,
Hmm.
I was really lucky growing up that I never felt like I would be, abused or hurt for being queer and living in New York City up until Trump got elected. I was never scared to walk down the street holding my girlfriend's hand.
Yeah.
And then Trump got elected and we're scared again. My parents told me, when you come back home, don't talk about your girlfriend because they will fight you.
Yeah.
Like that. And I'm like, oh, okay. Because people have gotten the hate has gotten a lot more emboldened these days. It's
Yeah, it
probably
has.
shittily was always there, but now they're not scared to talk up. And so for us, I feel like that's why a lot of these conversations are happening more loudly, because we have to create safer spaces and we have to learn how to be better allies, and we have to learn how to step up in situations where people who aren't safe or who are at more risk than we are aren't able to step up,
Hmm.
and use our white privilege to step in when there's a fucking ICE officer on a subway car. That literally happens in New York City every week. And it's disgusting and awful. And so as our world gets really messed up and really dangerous, finding ways to make safe communities and to teach people how to be better allies, I think it's really important. Um, I didn't start out Velvet Noir being like an important political LARP. I really wanted to just
Yeah.
kind of tell a noir, and then I wanted to hire more interesting voices than I've normally heard, because I've heard a whole ton of white voices
Yep.
for a real long time. Um, and then it became that I learned how to be a better ally, and a lot of the work that we're actively doing is, if you are a white person in one of these cultural factions, it is your job to learn to be an ally. That is to sit there and you're going to fuck up and you're going to put your foot in it and then learn to do better and make yourselves slightly better people for having been there.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that needs to be in art everywhere, in theater, in LARP, in gaming. These things can be political, and we spent a really long time saying, oh, we don't bring politics to the table because this is our fun time. But the world is political. All of our lives are political. I would put very good money on most gamers are disenfranchised in one way or another, or outcast in one way or another, and our existence has been made political. So we've got to find back. We've got to make safer spaces and teach other people how to be safe and how to be emboldened and stepping up to defend others, because the world is just shit right now.
It
Sorry to
is.
get really real. It's
Yeah,
just
no, that's it's amazing stuff. Um, so all that bishops says, you mentioned that you didn't intend for it to be political. Did you think? Did you originally think of noir as apolitical? If so, how did that change?
Ah, I won't say that noir was apolitical. There's a lot of good noir out there, which is highly political. Philip Kerr writes the Bernie Gunther series, which takes place in Germany before and after World War II, and is some of the most beautiful noir writing right now, and it is clearly highly political. Noir also as a genre is incredibly sexist and incredibly racist.
Yeah.
So I knew if we were writing a modern noir, writing noir in a modern day, but about the old setting, like I had to tackle those noir tropes and give people a way to reclaim them, because I wasn't going to be like, well, it's noir, so we can all be sexist assholes. Or if you are going to be a sexist asshole, because you can be that in the game, we have set it up where you get called the fuck out about it. And my fellow producer and I, Sam Stone, both really love noir, and he had said that as he got older and he realized how problematic noir was, he fell out of his love with it, because he's like, I can't be comfortable reading these stories where women are treated like objects, and then they throw around awful racist terms because it was being written in the 40s and people were as shit. So he kind of lost his love of noir. And that Velvet Noir gave it back, because we have taken all of that genre and all of those tropes and turned them on their head while actually maintaining the feeling of the genre and the police presence and what it is to be a criminal in that, and like the bad guys fighting in the dirt for like one single ray of sunshine. So I knew there would be some politics involved with Velvet Noir, and I knew that by hiring disenfranchised writers and just making that a goal, people would accuse me of being political. And I was like, that's okay. They can say whatever they want. And I still kind of feel like that. But then we started doing it, and I was like, oh, this is actually very political. That's okay. We're just going to lean into it. We've made these decisions, and I think it's important to make. And also the 1920s setting, we chose that for specifically political reasons. The morality movement was really just, it reflects a lot of the weird morality movements happening nowadays, and the war on drugs and the war on narcotics is a real mirror of the war on alcohol at the time. So the morality movement was there. It's almost 1929 in our game, so we knew that the stock market crash was coming, and the big housing inflation bubbles and the stock bubbles, and so we did choose it because of a lot of political elements that mirrored nowadays. We just didn't know how close it would be.
Yeah. The concept of the debrief, because hearing it, especially for your staff, it must be really tough, kind of playing these policemen or almost villain-like characters as you're trying to bring in those things. So, what is, if you can, what is a debrief like for them, playing kind of these like very type of characters?
Yeah, really hard, and a little shocking. And it was our first event in August, was the first time I ever ran NPC debriefs, because we got back from the first Federal Department of Treasury, which are the people who enforce prohibition, raid mod. So it was federal cops. They were very violent. We did a lot of really hard things. I don't think any of us realized how hard it was going to be. And then we got behind ops, and there was this beautiful meadow by a lake. And we just kind of sat there and we're like, oh, that happened. And I looked around and I went, oh, we're all fucked. We are all emotionally fucked. We're going to sit here and drink water and have a debrief now. Because we have to get rid of, or at least start working through those emotions before we go back into the game space as our characters. And so that initial debrief, when I realized we had all pushed limits that we didn't know we had, because we never thought we were going to be playing characters like that.
Yeah.
I asked them, I said, all right, we're going to go around the circle, and you're going to say something that you did in the scene that you are never going to do in a LARP again.
Mm-hmm.
Was there a limit that you pushed? Was there something where you're like, I never want to pick up that tool out of my toolbox or say those words or treat somebody like that again? And if there wasn't, think of something that you never want to do in this LARP.
Mm-hmm.
Again, cleanse yourself of it entirely. When I run debriefs, I normally have people wear a piece of their costume or their clothing, which as they are getting out of their character, they remove that piece of costuming and then put it away.
Mm-hmm.
And that is kind of like a physical, ritualistic cleansing of the character and that emotional space. And here I had everybody take their trench coats off and their hats and their ties and say, all right, what am I pulling from my body that I never, ever have to touch again?
Yeah.
And we all went around and we let go of those things and we acknowledged that maybe we pushed too far, or there are things we would never want to do again, or what did work, and just got back into being people. And
Yeah.
there's a lovely video. We have a video of one of the first arrests up online, and you can kind of hear some of the negotiation before and after. But Brett Lene, who was doing the video, left the camera rolling when the scene had dropped, and you can hear all of us checking in on each other and then laughing and going, oh, we did it, okay, I love you, oh my gosh, are you okay? And then laughing and cracking some crazy jokes, and just hearing that every time really helps me.
Yeah.
It reminds me that every single person in our community and our staff, when we do this, our first reaction when the scene is over is to check in on each other and laugh a little, and often sometimes hug or reassure each other we're good people, and remember who we are as humans before we go back into the game. So that's been how I debrief with my NPCs.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they need it more, sometimes they need it less, but that first scene was a real shocker. And then strangely, later on that night, we played a scene with a small handful of only staff and very trusted cast of Proud Boys and their girlfriends,
Mm-hmm.
who came into the queer farm just literally to be racist, hateful fucks.
Mm-hmm.
But there was only like 6 of us. And then the players attacked us with baseball bats and just basically said, no, fuck off, you white nationalists.
Yeah.
Go home. We got beat the shit out of and run off the farm and basically given wedgies and wet willies, if not concussions. And then we all felt really okay after that one. We're like, oh yeah, white nationalists got their comeuppance. Go
yeah.
That was awesome. And so that one was easier than playing the cops, and we thought it was going to be the opposite way. So this is how we learn, and then every game I redesign for what is our NPC plot going to be, how hard is this going to hit people, what sort of debriefs do we have to do as cast and as players, and then I learn what works, and whatever doesn't I leave behind and we try again.
So I know obviously the NPCs have a difficult job. I know in the past, seeing NPCs or storytellers act as certain characters, and then you never meet these people in real life. You can oftentimes kind of see them as always as that type of villain, or you think they're harsh or something like that. What does Velvet Noir do to kind of stomp on that, or just to show that the NPCs and the people who are playing villains are actually just awesome people who don't sympathize at all with the ideals that they are playing as these villainous NPCs?
Yeah, we're really lucky in that we have a good community. I've said it before, but I consider Velvet Noir a design of LARP called emergent LARPing,
Mm-hmm.
and nobody has to NPC.
Mm-hmm.
If you just want to come and play the game full time, you don't do an NPC shift.
Mm-hmm.
So over half of our players never even touch NPCing. The players that do volunteer for NPC all have main characters. They have characters that they play, and the most NPC time you will ever do at Velvet Noir is 2 hours out of a 39-hour weekend. So other players see these players as these awful NPCs for 2, maybe 3 hours max if they're holding on too long.
Mm-hmm.
And then otherwise, all of what people would consider face NPCs are our staff. We call them lead cast or our writers. And those are our characters. Sometimes they're bad people. I mean, it's a noir. We're all kind of playing criminals. There's a lot of us that are kind of playing bad people as our characters.
Yeah.
I'm playing a AFAB toxic masculinity trash fire of a character. But purposefully, I'm doing that. And I'm lucky that I was born AFAB. I am known as a very safe, trusted figure. So I'm able to push some of these harder scenes more because people know Ericka's really safe. And same with Sam. He's playing our only PC federal agent right now because everybody knows Sam. He has already really affirmed himself as a trustable person. We made a rule in the game that you couldn't bring a federal agent in as a PC until your second character. Your first character had to die before you could ever do that. So if you did want to play kind of a full-time asshole, people would know that you were a good person first.
Yeah.
So we basically do it by saying nobody's going to play a vicious racist cop for more than 2 hours. That is way too long. I try to keep those mods under an hour. They're really emotional, and then it's done. And then we have debriefs after every game. It's the first campaign game that I've ever run where we do debriefs. They're probably needed in more games, but people want to clean up their shit and get home because we all have long drives. But this game, the first one, I was like, oh, that was really hard on everybody. So we're going to take a half an hour and do debriefs. They're optional. You can stay in this room and do them. If you want to go clean up, go ahead and do them. And every single player stayed in the room.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay, I guess we need debriefs. We're just going to do them and get to know each other. So that's helped us a lot. And emergent LARPing has been really nice that we don't rely on an NPC cast. And that's probably what has saved us from somebody going, oh, this person has just come to play playing a cop because he's getting an excuse to play a white racist asshole.
Yeah.
And it's not comfortable to think that about people. And yeah, I still worry about that in some games. It's why at Damarung we have a policy of if you are an alt-right sympathizer, even, you can't play. Because this is way too close to being a LARP about Vikings.
Yeah.
And we know how cool the alt-righters think Vikings are. And so we don't want you sneaking in. We got to check your social media. I like hate being the social media police, but I will do it to make certain my community is safe and comfortable. Because the riots in Charlottesville, those people knew shield tactics because they had gone fighting with LARPers.
Yeah.
Like I heard that and I'm like, oh, they're making our hobby political for us. Fuck it, we have to fight back. So we have to be really careful about who we let in and who we let play certain NPCs. And that's what last week's blog was all about, was we can tell these stories that are very dangerous. You just have to put so many levels of safety in there, and that includes your community.
Yeah, why do you think it's so important for LARPers and for all of us to kind of engage in these dangerous stories, if we can?
If we can, the first thing I'm going to say is I don't actually think it's necessarily important. I'll be writing a follow-up blog because that is basically just because we can tell these stories, we don't have to. LARP and gaming overall still should be an escapism for a lot of people. There is no reason, if this is your hobby and these stories make you uncomfortable, that you should ever feel guilty for not going out to the really hard LARP that makes people emotionally bleed all the time and reenacts police violence against, people of color. There's no reason for you to go out and do that if you really just want to have a fun time, because a lot of these LARPs aren't necessarily fun. They're important, but they're not fun in a lot of ways. And nowadays, when we were talking about the world getting shittier and shittier, however you find escapism, as long as you're not violating somebody else's good time or the law, maybe the law, I don't know. Depends on what shitty law it is. But as long as you're not hurting somebody else, go find your escapism. Go have fun. Never feel guilty about enjoying a lighthearted thing. That being said, LARPing can be art. Art is political. Theater is political. And I don't think just because people call our hobby a game that we should hide under this thing of like gaming should only be happy, fun times, and we should never bring, as I said, never bring politics to the table. No, fuck that. they have politicized our existence.
Hmm.
So many of our existences, whether you're queer, you're a person of color, you're an immigrant, so many of us are politicized for so many reasons. And if we just sit back and ignore it, nothing gets better. These conversations never get had. You don't get to learn how to be a better person or what you would do in certain circumstances, um, this gives you practice.
Yeah.
It gives you practice of how you step up and be an ally when you see people getting bombarded like this and hurt like this. We had a literal immigration raid last game. How do you step up against ICE agents if you see that on the street? This is a place where you get least practice and see what you might want to do. But also, we have a trans player who realized that they dead name themselves.
Hmm.
They are using they right now. Um, when they're angry at themselves, and that's just an awful bad like self-harm habit is to dead name one.
Yeah.
And then we, in a scene that we did, we have this mechanic called the darkness, and it's basically your worst nightmares that everybody helps run for you, and then you come out traumatized, but you've gotten something out of it. In the darkness scene, their character was dead named repeatedly over and over as this like nightmare tactic, and then this player went home and went to do the self-harm tactic and was like, oh, don't do that, that's something the darkness does, that's fucking awful, and has stopped dead naming themselves because of what they went through at game. And that's amazing.
Yeah.
Stories like this where you actually get to try on parts yourself that you don't know you would ever experience otherwise, or go through these cathartic, really difficult experiences and come out cleansed or having learned something from the other side. I find that to be really important. That's why
Yeah.
I want to tell stories, and I want to offer a platform to people who also might want to tell those stories. As a theater creator, catharsis in like the platonic version of what catharsis or Aristotelian version has been really important to me. That people should go into a space and have a collective shared tragic experience. Catharsis was originally only about tragedy, because if
Hmm.
you all cry together as humanity, when you come out the other side, you feel cleansed of these tears and you realize you're not quite so alone, and it's very bonding, and it's important to the human soul. So I find that a lot of these LARP experiences can be really cathartic, because I can't cry at my day job. They're
Yeah.
gonna, I'm insane. I can't break down in the middle of the subway or in the middle of a staff meeting. But sometimes I really want to cry, and the world is really hard nowadays. So going somewhere where you are allowed to feel emotions and feel really strong emotions and take your body through a bunch of stress cycles and respond to them as your body was naturally emotionally built to respond, and then come out the other side in a safe place where you have a healthy community, even if it's just for one weekend, I think that's really important. And nowadays, as I was said many times, more than ever, because the world is really hard
Yeah.
and places to escape, whether it's fun gaming and happy, funny gaming, or if it's these really hard, cathartic stories.
And I'm sure. I mean, you were talking about the that scene with the Proud Boys. They were chased away with baseball bats and stuff like that. And I can just imagine kind of like the triumph the players must have felt being able to act that out in a scene that's sadly doesn't happen in today's world. Uh, and it just kind of that must have been an amazing moment for them.
Yeah, people really, we got a lot of good feedback on that scene, and we were so scared to run it. We thought that
Yeah.
was the riskiest thing we were doing that weekend. And then when the 5 of us playing the NPCs looked up and just saw a mob of people with baseball bats, we're like, oh no, oh no, they got our number. This is okay. Oh shit, we should start running. But it felt really good on all levels to be able to have a space to fight back, and a space where maybe things are gonna turn out happy in the end, even if they might not in real life. We can all have hope.
Yeah.
Uh, Protest fatigue is a real thing.
Hmm.
Those of us who are fighting back against these things in our daily lives every day, calling senators and doing all of that, you get fucking exhausted. And if you get no wins, that exhaustion is just going to win out. So
Yeah.
getting a win at a LARP over a weekend means you can come back and keep fighting the good fight in your regular life a little harder than you did the week before because you were just completely burnt from losing at every corner.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it must have been amazing. So all the bishops has another question.
Yeah.
The intimate nature of these games seems like it creates really intense bonds between players, even more so than usual. Has this increased intimacy been universally good, or is it a double-edged sword in some way?
Um, I have a really strict rule in our games, which is like no play between games,
Hmm.
and character should stay in character. And then when you go home, you should break character. Like, I see a lot of obsessive bleed of people's characters in their real life, especially games that you can play monthly.
Hmm.
And if you can travel to some more games, you could play this character every other week and never kind of have to think about your day job. And I've seen it happen. I went through it. When I was a 17-year-old vampire player, I would play vampire 24/7 every day of a week if I could. That was
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
um I never ever want this to happen. I have a blog, it was from last year, about the downsides of between game role play.
Hmm.
So we have a rule, which is we will only do 4 games a year or less to stop the amount of bleed and the amount of obsession that can happen between games and let you go play other games and experience other stories and other characters. Um, and we don't have like social media role play groups. The closest thing we have is a fiction writing group, and that's fine
Hmm.
because I feel like it's like encapsulated fictions.
Yeah.
The question of people getting really close and getting really intimate, that absolutely has been happening. All of our factions, I know that they have group chats that you can join once you have done one game as that faction. And I know like the Mishpacha, and I'm sorry, Samara, I'm still practicing how to say it. Their group chat now, out of game, anybody who's around on every Friday night, they do Shabbos prayers together.
Oh
They
wow.
get in a group chat and they light the candles, but it's them as people doing it.
Hmm.
It's not their characters. And that has been the rule of all of these group chats. You're welcome to make yourself a new community and make yourself friends, because a lot of these people have, even for the root, they said, we didn't know there were this many Black people in gaming.
Hmm.
And suddenly they're all in one room. We didn't think this was possible. So
Yeah.
we created really close, intimate communities of a type that people didn't think they were going to be able to find. And I want them to pursue that. I want them to have brand new friends that they can look to for support and talk about issues in gaming and their lives with their cultures. I'm not in any of these group chats other than the civilian ones because that's not my culture. I
Yeah.
don't know what they're going through. And the Jewish players probably need a really safe space to yell about how fucking Christmasized everything is this time of year without anybody going, "Oh, we're on Christmas" at them. So they've created that space. They all own that space and maintain control over it. And the only thing I ever ask is it's you out of game.
Yeah.
We
Definitely.
talk about some character plans for next game, but you're never doing like big long group role play chats together. Um, and everybody's really respected that rule so far. And do people bleed after this game? Yeah, really hard. This is probably one of the bleediest games around. Are people pretending to be their characters 24/7? No. And that was the rule that I wanted. Was the don't be in character all the time. We all have lives. Please focus on your lives as much as you focus on this game that you love. Actually focus on your lives a lot more. But they've made really good communities with each other, and I love hearing about the friendships that have been made through this game, which I think are going to carry on way after this game. If I'd get hit by a bus and it would shut down, I still think these people are going to be friends and consider each other family, and
Yeah.
awesome.
Oh, that's awesome to hear.
Yeah.
So for people joining us, feel free to post up questions, and I will make sure it is directed to Erica. So you were talking about debriefs, and debriefs kind of like really interesting for me because I've seen some good ones and I've seen a lot of bad ones. But how does it look like in Velvet Noir? What is kind of the practice that you've seen has worked the best?
um in Velvet Noir, my debriefing, people also call it de-rolling.
Hmm.
I kind of call it the same. I will always try to de-roll people somehow. Make certain that they make a strong transition between they are taking their character off and now they are themselves. And I really try to make certain people use third person when talking about their character in debriefs. And I instruct all of my faction leads and writers who help me run them. I'm like, if somebody starts talking in first person about their character, gently stop them and say, third person pronouns. We're not in game anymore. And people are like, oh yeah, she went off and did this awesome thing, or she went off and cried, sorry. And then you go on. So a strict rule of third person instead of first, and do something to remove your costume. I always run debriefs fairly similar. I'm working on maybe adding some things, but my favorite questions are strongest, like most impactful moment of the event, and then something your character taught you that you can take away into your real life. So I got courage from my character doing this, and I like, now Ericka can stand up in a business meeting on Monday and talk to these people better because I saw that I just did it to a room full of 50 people here. And then I always generally leave with something that you are leaving behind in the space about your character that you never want to touch again or you don't want to pick up. And that's where the debrief with the cops of what are you going to leave behind that you're never going to do again came from.
Yeah.
We often, like, very few people play perfect characters. Our characters do stupid shit, or we'll find out things about ourselves through playing these characters that is not healthy. Going, oh, I do that, and I didn't realize I did it until I saw my character doing that.
Yeah.
And I maybe want to work on that. So I'm going to leave behind so-and-so's codependency in the space and try to be more knowledgeable when I do it in real life and try to leave it behind with the character. So when you pick up those unhealthy things that you don't want to take back in your real life, making certain that the players have a space to air them out and leave them behind. And then other best practices are separating your debrief groups into like 7 to 8 people max. Our factions have been getting too big and we're going to have to split them up, and people never want to leave their factions. They're like, this is my family, all 20 of them. And I'm like, yes, but you don't have enough time to debrief with 20 people. Please split into smaller groups. So that's been a challenge that we've had, and I'm still going to have to like tell the wonderful, I don't want to call them kids, tell the wonderful LARPers to split into smaller groups. I promise you can talk about war stories on the ride home.
Yeah,
oh, and that's the other important thing about debrief. Debrief shouldn't be what we call war stories. It's not like my character did this and I was epically awesome or I was epically sad. It should be about moments and character traits and feelings. The war stories can get really long. The feelings or the psychology will help you remove yourself from your character a little bit more without getting in the muck of like, this scene went like this and then this person came to the room and then this happened. So I always remind people when debriefing, don't talk about war stories, try to keep it brief, and use third person pronouns.
Yeah, the third person pronouns, that's probably one of the best or one of the things that I feel are most important in preventing that bleed, because I've seen a lot of times when you're talking to another character like you, and then you're talking to them as a player, so then whatever comes next could very well be hurtful. So I really like the third person. I think even in the tabletop community is something that we kind of need to enforce, to make sure that the two don't meet up in a healthy way. So we have an interesting question from Kaza Marie, who just wants to know the spelling of D-roll. Is it D-E-R-O-L-E or D-E kind of like dash R-O-L-E?
I don't use the dash except for on my blog when I forget and do. I have no clue. I have also heard say D-E-R-O-L-L because when people in the tabletop community talk about it, like it's deep, you're not doing that anymore. Just like, does OK check-in, is there a dash there? Does look down have a dash? Are these things capitalized? Yes, they're capitalized, but I spell it D-E-R-O-L-E.
There
so
we go.
you're unrolling yourself, and but that's from my theater background.
So when people are engaging in LARPs and stuff like that, what have you kind of brought into these experiences from your theater background, and what do you think people who have never even touched theater in any sort of way would have come to your LARP? What can they learn, or maybe should explore a little bit about theater to kind of bring into it? Yeah.
Hilariously, like, doing improv theater will always help you in LARP. Go
Hmm.
to a local improv night. They're silly and they're fun, and nobody's good at it and everybody's good at it at the same time. Like, just shake off your improv bones and play some improv games. I wish we had more time to do more improv games, because I think that would help people think on their feet quicker and
Hmm.
realize you don't always have to find the right sentence. You can just say whatever. Nobody's recording these lines.
Yeah.
Um, so other than improv theater, the biggest things that I want to teach LARPers from theater is how to upstage yourself.
Hmm.
Like, I will often physically position myself in ways that I force other players to turn to the room so they can project more and be seen better.
Yeah.
Or if we're in a scene and we're like two people talking at a table, I'll make certain that we're arranged with our backs to the wall so we're still facing the entire room and can be seen, but we're sitting next to each other. So, like, even photographers can get better shots when both of you are turned out to whatever the audience is at that point in time.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of just stage awareness from theater and projection. I'm so glad I was a theater nerd and I learned how to project, and now I don't know how to be soft. But there's so many times where people are trying to communicate something at a LARP and they're so shy or they're so quiet. And I know there's 10 million people in this room, but just speak up a little more. I want to hear the lovely things that you have to say. You just have to say them a little louder. Otherwise, like, those two things, you're good to go. LARPing's not that hard. It's not that scary. Um, Lynn Hilton wrote a beautiful blog for us called something about narrative awareness. And that's helped me a lot. And I think it comes out of theater, of knowing, like,
Hmm.
when's a climax to a story? What's going on in this scene? Is it a good point for me to intrude on this scene? Or are they in the middle of something really deep and really dramatic? And maybe I shouldn't, like, come up and make a fart joke with them.
Yeah.
Um,
Definitely.
just having that little bit of awareness of the plot lines and the stories going on around you helps a lot in LARP, and I feel like I'm better at it, and people who have a training in any sort of arts or writing or theater are going to have that narrative awareness already.
Definitely. So we have some more questions. So this is really cool.
Yep.
So Kaza Marie says, Erica, do you have any workshop advice for getting a LARP group into character?
Ah, yes. I will say we took it out of Velvet Noir because my staff said we were wasting too much time. I want to put it back in. But my favorite getting into character workshop, I think I learned it originally from Johanna, who from Inside or Participation Design Agency, who
Hmm.
does Inside Hamlet, is walking around a space as your normal self. Just take a walk, see people, whatever, and then start thinking about your character and keep walking and figure out, does your character walk differently? Are they tired? Do they hold their weight differently? Are they very confident?
Hmm.
And then slowly start going into the body of your character. And if you aren't mobile, you can do all of this while sitting, changing how you position your body sitting and changing how you look around the room sitting, but going from your body to your character's body. And then as you continue walking, it's supposed to be a silent exercise. I start narrating, all right, start being aware of the people around you. How do you react to their body language? If you
Hmm.
catch eyes with somebody, how do you feel about them? Acknowledge that feeling, then move on. And meanwhile, it's all in your character's body. It's all starting to be emotionally aware of other characters and how they're presenting themselves. And then I also, in some workshopping, teach this for how you telegraph touch,
Hmm.
because we always need consent for touch, but it doesn't have to be verbal consent.
Hmm.
You can telegraph touch by, like, hey, I want to hug you. and kind of have arms up, but give that person the slow bullet time space to say no to that contact. So you can have people, we can coach them on telegraphing how you touch somebody and saying yes and no to that touch while they're walking around the room, while they're wearing their characters' bodies, and while they're interacting with other characters totally silently.
Yeah.
I love that part of workshopping. I'd really like to put it back into our workshops. Maybe I'll win that debate one day.
Hopefully. So speaking of workshops, all the bishops says, Ericka, have you considered running an optional theater techniques workshop?
I have. Yes. I am not certain where to run it yet. I've been trying to get my head around how I would run online workshops, but that's really hard because I think of workshops like theater workshops where you were in a space with people and you were all actively acting on things, actively rehearsing and trying techniques and doing things together. And so doing it online, I'm gonna be like, all right, stand up in your living room now.
Yeah.
Give the screen the okay check-in, pretend somebody said they're okay. Like, it would be a little difficult there, so I could give Facebook Lives like this, talking about it. But otherwise, I know Sinking Ship in New York City has done some like workshop and theater technique space rentals. I would probably try to find somewhere to rent in Philadelphia to do it, because that's a lot closer to like the tri-state area of where my LARP community is.
Yeah.
And do it on a free weekend whenever we have one of those. But I do have dreams and thoughts of doing something like that. And then it could be recorded. And if it's recorded, it's put up online. It's not the same as participating in it, but at least you can get an idea of things if you're really interested in it. So that's kind of on my list for 2020, and we'll see how many of these projects get tackled off of the list.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, moving forward, what would be kind of the perfect scenario for Ericka in the next coming year for Velvet Noir, as well as kind of the education of safety mechanics and consent in the LARP community?
The perfect scenario would be that some government money grant agency gives me a ton of money to run Velvet Noir full time. Probably won't happen.
Who knows?
I do have dreams of, like, I love my day job. Scientific American's amazing, but I do have dreams of running LARPs and doing LARP education and theater education full time. So if the work that Entropic endeavors and the work that I'm doing with other communities can get me to a point where this would be my full-time job, that would make me incredibly happy. If Velvet Noir does nothing but continue to like raise awareness of how to be good allies and give people safer spaces to tell their stories and keep pushing the limits of what they tell us we can't do in American gaming, and then we just keep doing, and we're doing it, I consider us doing it as safely as possible.
Yeah.
I'll consider it a success. I did not think this time last year we would get here. We were just starting the project. I hired most of my writers last January. Our preview was in May, and then our first game was in August, and now we sold out our third game in less than 10 days, which is unbelievable to me.
That's amazing.
But I just remember, I look back over my Facebook memories of all of this starting to get born, and I remember how terrified I was. I just spent half of 2019 pissing myself, terrified that we were doing this and something was going to go wrong, and it didn't. I mean, it did. Some things went wrong. Nothing's ever perfect, but the big bomb, the big explosion never happened, and it just got so much better every single time, and people saw it and got it and it clicked. So if Velvet Noir just keeps going and doing what it's doing, and we have more people from way more communities come and even just try it once so they can see what we do and take those techniques back with themselves, I will be a really happy, incredibly happy person. And as for educating safety stuff, yeah, come to anything Entropic endeavors. That is what I do. Player before game and safety are my number 1 and 2 goals. Come and try it out, see what we do, and if you find something you like, read my blogs and take it back to your communities. And if people have questions on how you do workshops and how you do safety things and all of that, that's why I write the blog.
Yeah.
Is out there as toolboxes for anybody to use for free. If you use my Patreon, I do half an hour consulting sessions every month for $10 a month. Like, we can just sit down and talk about how you want to do this in your LARP and in your life. And I love doing that. That's, anybody can reach out to me. Some people have called me intimidating. I hate it. I'm not. I'm super nice and I'm a huge big nerd. And please talk to me and find me online at any point in time. I might be really busy, but if I am, I will schedule another point in time. I promise that my door is open. So I really want that. I've gotten really lucky that there is a PhD student out of Denver. Her name is Amanda Rose, and I can't remember her last name. She's a delight. She's doing a part of her thesis on me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she's a PhD student in theater, and she's talking about how we bring safety mechanics into immersive theater, and is modeling a lot of it after game design. And so she's coming out to Velvet Noir and to probably Damarung and a few other places to like interview people about how this works and to see how I run workshops. So when she approached me a few weeks ago and said, "Hey, Ericka, I hear you do this thing. I know you don't know me, but can I talk to you for a while?" I was like, "Oh, this is a dream come true. Yes, of course. This is the sort of education I've been wanting to do." So I'm really lucky that I'm on the road to everything I want to be doing. I just have to keep doing it and not die and not collapse in exhaustion, which I'm pretty much there. If we got through 2019, I can absolutely get through 2020.
Only ways up.
Yeah, exactly.
So, we have someone curious about real royalty. But for people watching, we're coming about to the end of the show. That doesn't mean we won't have more interviews, because I think I want to continue to give Ericka Skirpan more time to talk on the show, because it's amazing stuff. But we are coming up to the end of this interview, so feel free. Now is the time. Send your questions in. And we'll definitely cover them before the night is done. But All the Bishop wants to know more about Real Royalty.
Sure. Real Royalty is a LARP that was originally written by Hanging Lantern. They ran it twice. It was amazing. I got to play last year. The Hanging Lantern team, Jeffrey Steele, Natasha Borders, and Benjamin McKiley. I really hope I pronounced all those right. They are brilliant. And Real Royalty is a pre-written character, somewhat more scripted LARP that takes place in a grim, dark fairy tale setting. So all of your favorite fairy tales exist on this planet. They're basically all different kingdoms. So there's like a Little Mermaid kingdom and a Beauty and the Beast kingdom and a Snow White kingdom. And they're all coming together for some interesting reason, and things go strange. Their lore is gorgeous and like 1,000 pages. They have written so much for this LARP. So when they said they weren't going to run it this year, I was like, "Oh, that's such a shame. It's such a good LARP, and you all did such hard work on it. Can we license it? You trust us?" So we had like 2 months of real talk about what we would want to do with the projects and what we would do licensing it and how we would handle safety and things like that, and money and all of those things. And eventually we came to an agreement. So we have licensed it from them. I'm really excited. It's going to take place at Camp Garrison outside of Philadelphia. It is a Boy Scout camp, so accessibility, it's mostly flat, fortunately, but it's gravel and grass. I just want to be upfront about that. And they're bunk beds. I'll be upfront about that. But otherwise, this camp has a pirate ship and a castle with 2 levels and a fort. And it's kind of mind-blowing. When I saw this campsite, I was like, we have to run Real Royalty here. It has a literal castle with turrets. It's so good.
Oh, that sounds perfect.
That's what's happening. I think that one of the coolest things about Real Royalty is when you get your character sheet, there will be massive gray blocks on it where memories should be, or some of your background, and you can't see it. And that is an implication of there's missing history here that you have amnesia from. You literally can't remember. And then other characters, as you go through the game, will have little envelopes that basically say, if you talk to Marie in Act 2 and you have a strong conversation, hand her this envelope. And that envelope is your memory. And so
Oh,
after
that
you
sounds
interact with somebody,
amazing.
it's so cool. So you have this deep, long scene with somebody, and then they walk away, and then your memory comes back that they had taken from you, or you got hit over the head, or were given a sleeping potion or something about that person. You're like, they just walked away. Oh my gosh, they did this thing to me. And it's super cool. There's a lot of other interesting story mechanics they've used, but that was one of my favorite things from Real Royalty. So I'm excited to be bringing it back. And it's Entropic's Endeavor's first like half try at what you would consider a blockbuster LARP.
Yeah.
We really worry about accessibility issues, not just
Mhm.
physically, but price wise. That's why Velvet Noir is always going to be under $150. Real Royalty is going to be more expensive because we're going to pay more staff and we need a lot more set dressing, and it's going to be fully catered, and we're going to try to like give what you would consider the blockbuster experience
Mhm.
for not quite the $800 to $1,000 price tag. We're looking at about half of that.
Yeah.
So I want to be honest about money because I'm always upfront and transparent about these things. And we have to pay to license it. Hanging Lantern deserves to get royalties for the amazing work that they did.
Yeah. That's
So, but
awesome
that's
to
the
hear.
project. It's going to be September 25th to the 27th, 2020.
Awesome. So, we're coming up at the end here.
Mhm.
For our last couple of minutes, what do you want to say?
Oh goodness. Player before game. Going into these games, and even if I suspect if you roll your eyes at X cards on tabletop games, you're not listening to this. But when you are going into a game, always think about that's another human being across from you,
Yeah.
and you don't know what they're going through. They might be off their meds. Somebody might have just died in their family. It might have been a really, really rough week at work. People are going to violate your boundaries, and it sucks. And you need to keep setting them when that happens gracefully and respectfully. Respect yourself and respect the other person when we're having these hard conversations of, hey, you yelled at me way too loud and I think you were kind of mad out of character, and then I checked in and you didn't stop, and I need you to stop.
Mm-hmm.
Respect that. Why did they do that? It's really hard to say, but yeah, respect that they were having a hard time. Something made them violate your boundary. You still need to bring up and defend yourself against that. And if you have done that to somebody, I know I have gotten over emotional in scenes before because I go really deep and really hard, and that can be overwhelming to people. Acknowledge that you fucked up. Examine your behavior. Say I'm sorry. Step back, reassess, reevaluate, figure out how you're going to do better in the future, and then do better. I guess that's what I want to end with. Just because you've made a mistake doesn't mean the world is over. The only way we get better is by learning from our mistakes. I fuck up all the time. Recently, when we sold Entropic Endeavors tickets for the last Velvet Noir and we sold out so fast, we realized that it meant people of white people or people of privilege who had easy access to money got the chance to buy tickets before a lot of our demographics did. And that was a huge error on my part. Yeah. And I've fessed up to it publicly. I've told my staff we have ways of how we're going to design for that next time, and we're probably going to release ticket blocks to certain people and previous players and to the factions before certain other things to make certain that all the people we want to be able to access this game can, and it's not just who got to the buzzer the fastest with their money.
Yeah.
But I messed that up. And I'll admit it, as somebody who thinks she's one of the safest game runners in this country, and I'm doing really aware things, I fuck it up. Y'all are going to fuck it up too. Doesn't mean you stop, and it doesn't mean you hate somebody for fucking it up. If you're willing to do the education on what somebody has done wrong, please teach us to be better. Teach all other LARPers to be better with grace and respect. And it's been happening. I see this awareness happening a lot, and this willingness to educate. And I just thank everybody for your social and emotional labor and helping all of us who do fuck up get a little bit better every single month. And if you're not up for the teaching, lean on your allies.
Mhm.
Let them speak up for you and do the teaching too. Please wave at us. We're here, we're trying, and we're learning. But don't be scared to take risks. Don't be scared to take mistakes. Just make certain you learn from them when you make them.
That is awesome. All right, everyone, thank you so much for coming up and watching this at Penny for a Tale, whether it's here live or recorded in YouTube or on the podcast. Ericka, thank you so much for coming on tonight. This was an amazing time, and I definitely want you back on the show, and we'll talk about more stuff, and it'll be amazing.
Sounds good.
For people who are watching, please check out her work on entropicendeavors.com. You can also see her blog, The Space Between Stories. All this stuff has been posted. And if you're watching on YouTube, they are right underneath right there. So click on it, and it also has her Patreon information on there. Support, and if you can, go on to her website for that Velvet Generation, Velvet Noir, and make sure to do what you can to probably get into that game because it is amazing. But yeah, everyone have a wonderful night, and
Good
always
night,
play
my friend.
safe.
Yep.
Good night, everyone.
Night.